Okay, well, everyone, this is Corey Rigler, and also with me is Mike McFadden. And before we get any further, I just want to compliment Mike. I asked him to create a sexy PowerPoint presentation, and but make it simple, not too complicated. And he really knocked out of the park. Just white background, black text. Way to go, Mike. Anything you want to say for yourself?
I was going to say, I really appreciate that. Sexy is my middle name.
Well, good. Okay. I'm not sure where to go with that, but so this faculty training video is going to be on the first discussion group. And Mike, I know that I've been on faculty, 18, 19, 20 years across Queastor, Proconsul, Magister. I don't know, maybe I'm forgetting one or two as well. Basically, this is going to be some of the stuff I think that I've learned over the years across the different divisions. And what I've really discovered is that if kind of almost regardless of what division I'm in, this is really kind of the formula that works for me. So, Mike, how often have you facilitated, or how many times have you facilitated BLTW or other discussion groups not BLTW related?
Yeah, truthfully, not too many. I've had a little bit of time with HQ, so being on staff for a few years. I helped kind of facilitate with our alumni ambassador program, which we were running when I was there, and a lot of that was on the alumni side too. So, I'm excited to learn and also talk about some of the things that I recall from those times, and a few other times I've had to lead some discussion groups with an I-Week project, or did some chapter advisor work once at BLTW as well. So definitely want to learn, but also bring in my expertise with some of the things that I've done too.
Okay, yeah, so I think whether you're a veteran faculty member listening to this or a rookie, then hopefully Mike and I can give some pretty good perspective and guidance in terms of what your first discussion group should look like. So for when I do my very first discussion group, Mike, I don't know if you go into it with specific objectives in mind. I would say these are mine. I definitely like to set the tone. Hey guys, we're here for work. We're going to have a blast. We're going to learn a ton, but beyond time, do all the things that we need to do. And, I also say that one of my absolute goals is to make sure this is the best SimCai experience that you've ever had, and so I do a lot of stuff to check in, just to make sure that I'm kind of tracking, and I think that's one thing that I've really learned over the years, and we'll come back to that. But truthfully, you're like, man, this first discussion group, just getting people's names down can be a monumental victory, I always like to make sure the room setup is good. I do a lot of stuff dealing with the top 10, also known as parking lot. We'll cover that in a little bit. And then also, really, for this first discussion group, I tend to do a lot of icebreakers and experiential exercises. So, Mike, I mean, is there anything maybe as a first-time facilitator you're planning on doing, or can you even recall from when you were an undergrad and you went to BLTW, what kind of what you expected out of that first discussion group?
Yeah, definitely. So if it kind of sounds like you're a little bit like me. My biggest issue is always names. I can't remember names to save my life. So kind of what we've got here, setting the tone when you first get in there. But also, these are our brothers, and you want to get to know them and learn who they are, and obviously remember their names. So that's always a top priority for me. But the things that I always kind of remember with starting, gosh, when I was an undergrad, doing or being a part of group discussions, and even as I was a little bit older, I think one of the biggest and best things are the icebreakers, because you're in a room full of guys from all over the country, different backgrounds. Every chapter is different in their own right, and getting to know a little bit more about the guys that are you're going to be with them for a few days, and you're all going to be sharing ideas and reflecting on things, and being able to learn about each other is definitely a top priority for me. Um, and again, that definitely comes through the icebreakers.
Well, I'm really glad you gave a lengthy answer on that. I've got a pug named Chicken, and he's a total asshole. So you started answering a question, and I muted you, and he's been barking nonstop for 5 minutes. But I paid attention to every word you said. In the event I didn't, could you start all over again? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't know if there's any like San Francisco 49er fans on here, but they had an old head coach named Bill Walsh. And one of the things that Bill did that I thought was really cool, he actually planned out his first quarter. Every single play of the first quarter was already drawn up, because he kind of admitted, he's like, I am such a wreck during that first quarter that I don't even want to have to think about this stuff. So, just for him to have everything done in advance was a huge help. And then he kind of went with the flow. And I have to admit, as time goes by, I think that approach makes a lot of sense. So I've actually tried to basically say, okay, no, regardless of what, is expected of me to cover in these different discussion groups, this is what I do. And this is what's comfortable to me, because if I can set the tone and those relationships and that communication early on, then I can kind of breeze through everything else. So, I really do encourage all facilitators, especially really the newer ones, kind of think about doing that. Really, what is your first discussion group? Almost minute by minute, what are you going to cover? And I think, so now if we move in, what are the things you can do before BLTW, before the actual stuff starts? And, we'll all get some time to go into our rooms. And I think to just kind of make sure everything is checked out. I am a real big believer in having chairs in a circle. If for no other reason, then it sounds weird, but I do not want to be viewed as the expert in this discussion group. And I think what I mean by that is, I'm not sure about you, Mike, but man, for a long time, I think like my biggest fear was like, oh gosh, what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? Because I was never a queaster myself, right? And so part of it's like, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of these guys. But then what I realized was, you know what? I'm not the expert. I'm a facilitator. It's a big difference. So that means is I'm just trying to facilitate conversations. So, I'll ask questions, or, if somebody asks me a question, my default response is always like, that's a great question. How'd the group answer that? Or Tommy, how would you answer that? Or Lauren, how would you answer that? And when they answer, I actually prefer that they don't look at me. I want them to look at each other. So that's why, having chairs in a circle is a really, really important thing. Now, some people might be kind of in fixed seating, maybe like an auditorium type thing where that's not possible. If it is possible, I highly, highly encourage it. I don't know, Mike, if is that what works for you, or do you see anything different?
Yeah, well, and before I even get in on that, I am a 49ers fan, and even though I'm not an old man like you are, I definitely know who Bill Walsh is, and going into that first quarter, having everything planned out does make sense, and especially as a first time facilitator, as the better prepared you can be, obviously that's going to be better for you in the long run. When you get in there for the first time, you are going to have those butterflies in your stomach, the nerves of, what kind of like to your point, what if I don't know the answer? And, am I supposed to be the expert? And all those kind of things rush through your head. But to keep that in mind of, if you have a plan and you stick to that plan and you get through, the first couple sessions on that first day, you'll kind of notice how everything just starts to fall into place. And I agree with you with, chairs in the circle is one of the best ways to do discussion groups. I remember my first time at BLTW, I was in emerging leaders, and I think there was about 7 of us in the breakout group, and that was, I think, the very first thing we did was we put our chairs in a circle, and it helps a lot because, again, like you said, if you're in an auditorium, that's one that's one thing. But if you're in an actual classroom where you can move the chairs around, you kind of take away from the, you know, I'm an expert type role if you're standing at the head of the classroom. If you're in the circle, you're kind of with all the guys, you're with them on the ground level to an extent, and you're right. They're going to talk to each other and not directly at you, and it's easier to ask, well, Corey, what would you say to that, or do you have any thoughts for what Steve just asked? And again, like I said, I think it's a lot easier to be involved that way as opposed to standing at the head of the classroom and that them just kind of always looking at you, because that this is their opportunity to learn and work with each other and get those best practices sometimes from a very similar chapter, or sometimes bigger chapters have good ideas for smaller chapters, and vice versa. So those are definitely the things that I would highlight as well. Kind of to your point, is just kind of getting yourself there ahead of time, setting everything up to make sure you've got everything where you want it, and you're ready to go too.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you saying all that. Again, to kind of go back to this thing, like nobody wants to look like an idiot, especially in front of these undergrads. You're probably like, oh my gosh, you're a facilitator. That's so awesome. And, if you don't have the answer to a question, what are some ways that you deal with it?
That actually kind of comes from my, some of my professional experience too, is, if you don't know the answer to a question, sometimes it is okay to say, I may not know, but I'm going to check with someone who does. Or if there's a big enough topic that, that all the chapters are having, or if you're speaking with another facilitator that you hear they're kind of having the same issues, combining groups, and then also, maybe bringing in an individual who can speak to that better. If it's Tommy Gettings, or, another past grand consul or officer in general who has been the Grand Queastor at some point, being able to give them other resources. And sometimes it's also nice to not always have to be the one facilitating. Gives you a little chance to take a break, and also a chance for you to learn. It gives you that opportunity to learn along with them. And then, if you come back in the future when that question is brought up again, you can definitely come back and answer it. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you do have to kind of look at yourself and say, yeah, I'm not the expert, and I will definitely find out for you. And when we, reconvene, if it's after dinner, I'll have that answer for you. And again, I think they'll be very appreciative of it. And again, it's a learning opportunity for you as well. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is, remembering that, the things that you don't know, you definitely want that opportunity to learn too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. I agree. If a grand trustee comes in your room, what question should you ask him?
Ooh,
You ask him where the buffet is.
exactly. Yeah, the buffet. What
what are the hours for the cafeteria?
That's right.
Okay, so if we move on, I mean, really, if we kind of get back to that Bill Walsh model, I mean, here is essentially the agenda that I use, and I'll kind of zip through these pretty quick. And again, it seems weird, but if you do these things, it will pretty close fill up about like an hour and a half. I haven't looked at the schedule, but that's usually how long the first sessions are. So pretty good. So what I do really right off the bat, man, I love this icebreaker. It's probably my favorite all-time icebreaker whenever we start something. And it's just called the ball toss. And it seems weird because like now we've got everyone in a circle, or we've put the chairs in a circle, we've done stuff. And almost immediately, kind of what I'll do is I'll say like, okay, everyone, leave your craft here. Let's all go outside real quick, and just right off the bat, I'm getting these guys moving. I want there to be like as much energy as I can. I kind of trying to build some excitement. And basically the materials are, you need 4 tennis balls. Oh, shit. Sorry. Chicken has struck. Chicken has struck.
It's like the first time you've ever done this or something.
Well, he's an asshole. I keep telling you. But so to have 4 tennis balls, and then one thing that's a little bit different. Maybe it's a golf ball, maybe it's a bowling ball. Last year I threw around a breast implant, for my one thing. But so what you do is you get her out in a circle, and there's essentially 3 rules, right? First rule is you have to say someone's name before you throw in the ball. So I'd be Mike. Second rule is you have to throw it to somebody who hasn't had it, who has not yet had it. So you would have it, you go Johnny, then Johnny to Stuart, then Stuart to whomever, and then whomever Riggs, they throw it back to me. Okay. A third rule is once you've established the pattern, that's the pattern. Okay. So then we do it. So now we officially start, right? So I'm like, Mike, Johnny, Stuart, blah, 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 Riggs. Yeah, and then we kind of keep going, and you let that one ball go 1 or 2 times around so people start getting the hang of it, start learning each other's names. And what I find works best is almost like if you have a bag and you don't show them what's in it. So while it's going around, then I reach my bag, I grab another ball, Mike. Then they're like, oh shit, now there's 2 balls going at one time. And then, I wait a little bit, and then I reach down, Mike, I grab another ball. So now there's 3 balls. Then Mike, grab a 4th ball. Now there's 4 balls going in. And again, these discussion groups have anywhere from like 9 to 14 people. So it can kind of handle it. And that's when I'll then reach in and grab the other thing, in my case, the breast implant, and throw them around. Everyone's like, whoa, what's that? And it just totally, and it's actually pretty fun. And it's pretty exciting. But as a facilitator, there's kind of some things you want to watch for, right? One is you want to watch, did anyone kind of underthrow or overthrow it, right? And sometimes that's very common where we'll see that, man, like somebody gets so freaked out and they're only worried about receiving the ball that they totally just, totally just shank the throw. And then usually, there's somebody who has to chase it or do whatever. And it actually makes it pretty fun. Then you stop, the balls all eventually come to you. You put them all away. But what I have to say is there's a difference between an icebreaker and experiential exercise. And the difference is really in the debrief, right? So that's when I'll be like, all right, everyone come together. What do we learn from this, right? And here's some pretty good debrief questions, essentially, what was it like when one ball was going around? They should say it was pretty easy. Where was your attention focused? Usually in the person throwing the ball. What was it like when there was everything in the circle? People are like, holy cow, it was a lot harder, right? And if, Mike, if you were going through that, does that seem like it'd be something fun for you to do? Kind of a different way to start your BLCW experience?
Oh, definitely. It definitely does. And, kind of like you were just saying, the difference between the exercise and the icebreaker is key. Having that opportunity to reflect and understand, or really it's an opportunity to get these guys thinking, because they're probably just going out there having a good time and throwing the ball, dropping the ball, trying to figure out, because they probably never touched a boob, what the breast implant is. And but bringing them back in and kind of saying, okay, what can we take away from what we just did? Let's take a look and say, what if you're a Queastor and you're just working with the one guy, it's it's an easy thing, but realistically, you're not working with just one guy. You've got to have your eye on the ball in every direction, and getting them to kind of start seeing, so I don't want to say underlining, meanings behind everything, but really kind of making them realize that everything that you're going to go over and everything that you're going to do has a purpose. And you should be thinking about how everything that you do can relate to your role within the chapter. Because there are going to be those times where you're just working with the one guy back and forth, passing that ball, no problem. But then the console has something for you. And then the social chair has something for you, and rush is about to start, and that's the thing. You've got to prepare them as much as possible, and again, getting their minds ready for what really is an intense few days of um, group discussions and group exercises. To your point earlier, getting them out of their seats is a good thing. We've all obviously been to school before, and after a while, sitting and talking, it can get monotonous and really get boring. So getting them up, getting them involved with an activity, and something as simple as this, where they just think they're throwing a ball, actually has a meaning now. And
Yeah.
that is a key instrument with keeping their attention too, because everybody's going to want to be on their phone or try to space out, but changing things up from, well, we're just going to sit in the circle and talk and talk and talk. It does give them a chance to kind of wake up, really think about different things and kind of get a little bit more excited too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think this exercise goes really well, actually, when somebody does drop a ball or overthrows a ball, because then, when you're kind of facilitating it, you're kind of like, what might that represent? And, I think I think this exercise actually is a really good job of kind of describing life as a Queastor. I mean, they might start off being a Queastor thing like, oh, this is easy. All I got to do is this. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got to collect dues. Oh, I got to expel some guys financially. Oh, I got to send guys to collections. Oh, I got to pay these bills. Oh, I got to, it just starts piling on and piling on. And yet when someone drops the ball, I think it's a pretty good depiction for what happens when guys don't pay dues. Because all of a sudden now you can't do social. Now you can't do recruitment. Now you can't, now you can't keep the lights on, so there's a lot of different ways to do it. But again, it's as a facilitator, in my experience, best single icebreaker to learn people's names. The fact that you can kind of tie it back to the role of the Queastor, I think, is a bonus. So then from there, then I immediately kind of have them kind of get back in a circle, and only this time I'll throw it to somebody else, but it's exact same rules, right? You have to say someone's name before you throw them the ball. You have to throw it to someone who hasn't had it before, and that's it. Okay. Now, this one is a little bit different because there's only going to be one ball, but you're also going to have a stopwatch. So you're going to throw it, Mike, Johnny, Stuart, whoever. And then you're like, okay, that was pretty good. Let's see if can we get faster with this, and you just kind of keep going. And it's kind of fun because guys naturally are competitive, and they'll be like, oh yeah, let's get faster. And and now your job as a facilitator is not to answer questions. It's really to be a facilitator. Like, okay, could we make this faster? Is this as good as we want? And you always have one guy who will say, I think we can go a little faster. And then from there, it's all like, okay, well, anybody have any ideas? And again, I can't emphasize enough, it's your job to not provide any answers. Have them come up with stuff. And so some guy, some person might say, well, what if we get closer, or what if we get in order, or something like that? And again, you're like, I don't care what we do. I just want you guys to go faster. And, and then you let them go a round or two like that. And don't be surprised if the first time you do it, you're 15 seconds, then now all of a sudden you're at 8 seconds. And this is when it's kind of fun, because then what you do is you then say, okay, what if I told you for a group this size, the fastest I've ever seen is 4 seconds? And the guy's like, how would they do that? Well, if they really want to get creative with it, they'll actually put themselves in order. So like I'm throwing to you, and you're actually going to be right next to me, right? And then Johnny will be right next to you, and and then they'll also like just get really, really close, or they might even get like in a line, right? So, but basically, I mean, like, don't be surprised that after all said and done, like it's like 2 seconds or less, And again, what a great exercise to facilitate, because here you are like, why do we do this? Based on what they come up with, the number one thing you want to come up with is like, hey, all I did was tell you we had to do something. I didn't tell you how we had to do it. And you guys found a way to make it much more efficient. And again, you tie it back to the role of a Queastor, right? How's that, come back to what you're doing as a Queastor? And hopefully what they're realizing is there's better ways to do things that either make them more efficient, more effective. So I don't know if you have something else that you can bring in from your own toolbox in terms of something that kind of accomplishes that same goal or not, Mike, but I think this one works really well for me.
Yeah, I agree. Which I'm, very rarely going to ever disagree with you, but it gives them, again, it's that opportunity to think outside the box of, what can we do as a group to make things better, to run more efficiently, and hopefully it, they figure this out on their own. It's kind of like when you're doing the queue. You hope that this individual has realized or paid attention, understood everything that's been going on during during all the nights and discussions that we have during an I week. And when they get it, there was something that, for some reason, this has always stuck out to me, and it's something that you can only do one time, but I did this back in, I think I think it was about eighth grade. One of our teachers took us outside, and our goal was to see who could get a piece of paper to go the furthest. And everybody has this idea. Everybody's folding their own paper airplanes, and we get out there, and everybody throws. Obviously somebody has the winning airplane, and then it's his turn, and he just crumbles up his ball of paper and throws it, way past everyone else's. And again, it's and you kind of look at that and you say, oh man, I'm an idiot. All I had to do was crumble up a piece of paper. But the way I look at it is I kind of link these two things together, where you may all be in a disorder, but if you put your minds together and you think of the best way to throw that piece of paper, you're probably going to come up with that idea of just crumbling it up in a ball, because it's probably 9 times out of 10 it's going to go the furthest. I know some guys really know how to fold paper airplanes. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them.
Nerd.
Yeah. But yeah, so again, that's another opportunity for them to really kind of try to realize on their own of what can work best, and if we work together as a team and we combine our ideas, and we make this as efficient as possible. So again, like we were saying, these exercises are great because it kind of gets them out of the chair, gets them thinking, and it really makes them come together at their first breakout session. They're getting to know these guys, getting to learn their names, and you'll kind of start to see eating with each other at lunch and at dinner, as opposed to, well, I'm going to go sit with my chapter. They start kind of creating those bonds and friendships that are going to last, and it's these little things that can help start that process.
Or if it's like my first discussion group as an undergrad, you might hate each other, and that's okay too, but at least you'll be busy throwing balls around, Okay, so if we kind of move on down, just kind of down the agenda. So now we've done two pretty good icebreakers. Now we go back up into the room. And this is just kind of the time where I just like kind of, again, focus on some of these facilitation tips. First of all, it's okay that you don't know all the answers. And it'd be really rare if you did. But again, I actually, when I discovered that I could be a facilitator rather than the expert and know it all and everything, it was actually really freeing for me. It actually took a lot of pressure off my shoulders. I think that one of the best things to do is actually the boomerang tactic. And are you familiar with the boomerang?
I don't think that is one I'm familiar with.
Okay, ask me a question. Ask me anything.
Uh, Riggs, what do you do for a living?
Um, Mike, that's a great question. Johnny, how would you answer what I do for a living? Right? So what a boomerang is, all you do is redirect, and basically if somebody asks you a question, again, what I'm trying to establish as a facilitator is like the group collectively knows more than I do, and rather than make myself look like an idiot, I will usually have the guys answer each other first. And then, after they're done, then I'll kind of chime in and say, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'd add to it this way and this way and this way. But that's actually a pretty awesome thing to do. I also really like to kind of get outside and kind of go to different places if we need to. But another really important thing, man, one of the first things actually we should do when they enter into the room is actually set up a group text channel right away, or else get everyone set up on GroupMe. And I don't know, is that something you guys do, or have you kind of have like other communication trees or anything like that?
Well, when I did my discussion groups or first went to BLTW, probably uh kind of like you did as an undergrad, we didn't have things like GroupMe, so or group text at the time. So I can't say that I've ever done that, but I mean we use it for for a few different things. My soccer team here in town, we use GroupMe. It's just, it's an easy way to communicate, and, everybody can get the text and see her right away. Like you said, setting that up right away, it makes it a lot easier. And so I don't forget, one of the best things I think for when you're facilitating is, making sure you kind of have a notebook and something to write with as well, because as these guys are discussing things, it may um, make you have questions to get them to think a little bit more. And so you want to be able to make sure you're prepared, to write down a few notes, or if they, have a few collective ideas together, write those down and be able to, reflect or come back to them. Because I can't tell you how many times where, I've been involved in, some kind of meeting, and while they're talking about something, I sit there and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I have a good idea for this. And then by the time everything gets wrapped up and they come back and they're like, well, does anybody have any good ideas to, help improve this? Because I didn't write it down, I can't remember what I thought of, an hour ago. So that's definitely one thing I would say for being prepared, especially as a new facilitator. But yeah.
Dude, I love that you said that, because actually one of the things that I've definitely identified is a best practice and a watch out is to basically kind of set the expectation, like, guys, this is leadership school you're coming to, and we're going to learn how to be a better SIG, a better officer, a better manager, a better leader, and a better Queastor. So take notes. And in fact, one of the things that I will do very frequently, I'll ask two questions. And I think checking in is something it took me kind of a long time to kind of realize how to do. And then once I did it, I'll never ever do anything. I never ever won't do it. And so I'll ask guys to take notes. And then kind of, if we get done with the section, or even like kind of like right in the middle of a heavy section, or if I feel it's dragging, I'll ask them a check-in question. And what I'll say is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is you're horrible, this is a waste of time, and 10 is you're doing amazing, I get it, let's move on. What number are you? And if you're not a 10, what do you need to be a 10? Right? I think that follow-up question is even more important. So, and then what I'll do, then I'll actually take notes. And I was like, all right, well, Mike's a 6. He's too busy checking his grinder app to pay attention to the, to the curriculum. But if I consistently get like 9s and 10s, I'll be like, all right, we're doing great, and it lets me know I can keep going. If everyone's consistently like at a 5 or 6, and based on what they tell me, I might say like, hey, you know what? Let's stop right here. Let's table this, and let's talk about something on your top 10 list. So I am absolutely not afraid to stop literally right in the middle of something. If the energy is low, move on to something else and then come back to it. In fact, a lot of times I find that help. But also another thing where I think taking notes is really helpful at the end of every single discussion group, I have just made a point to do this where I'll say, I want to hear what's the best thing you've learned in this session. And by the way, everybody has to say something completely different, so it pays to go first, you know? And when you do that, guys are kind of like, oh my gosh, like, you know, because, you know, if you go first, I mean, you can kind of, they're hitting the low-hanging fruit, you know? But it's also kind of setting a signal and conditioning my guys, like, hey, I expect you to take notes because you're going to be called on, you know? So what about you? Any other good check-in things that you do that, you know, that really kind of helps out?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but you know, I like I said, I'm rarely gonna ever disagree with you. So, you know, I think that's good. You know, you have to check in with, you know, and see how you're doing. And you know, again, like you said, we're all, this is a leadership conference. We're there to learn. We're there to, you know, become better SIGs, and definitely taking notes. If someone isn't taking notes, then you know, then that's a whole other issue. You know, it is, you know, hopefully it's never, you know, to the point of where you've got to kind of pull a guy aside and kind of make sure that he is, you know, wanting to be here and is engaged to be here, and you know, and he's enjoying being a part of the group, or you know, maybe he feels like his voice isn't being heard. So that's an opportunity to, you know, if you're going to start like a discussion, let him lead, or start off with the answer and kind of let him lead, you know, the topic to a degree. But yeah, kind of getting the check-ins as you go, because as you know, as it being your first time as a facilitator, you are going to be nervous, and you're going to want to make sure that everybody's having a good time and learning. And you know, it's not always the easiest thing to read people and know if they are. And you know, again, you know, it's kind of being transparent with them and say, you know, that this is, you know, my first time being a facilitator. This, you know, I'm also learning, and welcome, you know, the positive and negative feedback so I can become better as a facilitator. You know, just kind of the same reason that they are there, to become a better Queastor. Um, you know, this is our opportunity to become a better facilitator, and they can help you with that.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think you just touched on something, that is that, man, there is nothing more frustrating in the world than thinking you're just crushing it, and then you get your final evaluations back, and guys are like, I hated it. You know, like all we did was talk about this, and you're kind of like, why didn't anybody say anything? You know, and what I've realized is that, you know, a lot of times what you ask is like, how are we doing, guys? We're doing good? And be like, yeah, we're doing good. You know, and so it's almost like you're asking a BS question and you're getting a BS answer and response, you know, and so to actually like, okay, I want you guys to actually assign a number to it. That is more, you know, that's more helpful for me, you know. But again, it almost takes practice. I mean, you almost really kind of have to say, like, I'm going to do this 1 or 2 times per discussion group. And if you don't, then it can, you know, I think it can potentially bite you, you know. So again, it's just
Yeah,
something
definitely.
I've learned over the years, and you know, I think I wish I would have done that a long time ago. Well, let's get past that. So one of the other things that I always like to say is that, you know, my goal is to make sure that this is the best Simicai experience you've ever had. You know, period. You know, even topping your initiation, everything else. And so, you know, I like to throw in a little bit of stuff with ritual. I kind of do like a little bit of a mini PIT. I'll throw in, you know, stuff from my work experience, any leadership books that I might have read. I like to kind of throw that in. But essentially, what I also like to do, though, is make sure that these guys, that we've established a top 10 list or a parking lot. And regardless of what term you use, I think it's the same concept, but it's basically, what's the number one most important thing that you need to cover? And if we don't cover, this workshop will have been a waste of your time. You know, we're going to have another video just on that topic alone, because the thing is, regardless of division, regardless of what year, it's the same damn list every time. I mean, like literally every time. And last year I was actually facilitating, and the guys had some stuff, and I wrote save, so the janitor wouldn't erase it. Sure enough, janitor erases all of it, So the next morning I was like, all right. So I go up there and I was like, okay, guys won't pay dues. Alumni won't get involved. I spent all my time collecting. What about guys who can't pay versus won't pay, whatever? And everyone was like, oh my God, Riggs, do you have like a photographic memory? And I was like, no, it's the same damn list every year. Like, these are not new problems, But anyway, so that'll be covered on a separate topic. But I do make a point to say, hey, listen, we'll go back and forth between the regular curriculum to what you guys want to talk about. So, so now, Mike, let's go back to you as an undergrad, just real briefly. If you were an undergrad sitting in there, was this important to you? And did your facilitator actually do the steps kind of outline in a top 10 or parking lot format?
I think the 1 year I went to BLTW as an undergrad, because I joined Sigma Chi going into my senior year, so I was a late bloomer in that sense, among other things that we won't talk about. But I don't recall doing the top 10 list, but again, it is a great thing to have, and I do kind of recall us all, talking about, like you said, having those same problems. And again, this is a chance for them to learn, and you want to make sure that you address their biggest concerns. And having a list, definitely is that opportunity to do so, because again, they're here to learn and they're here to engage, and we do want to give them the best experience possible. And covering the things that are the most meaningful for them is one of the best things you can do. And to that point, that's really what happened with me when I went to BLTW the one summer. We talked about, or one of the subjects we talked about was alumni engagement. There we go. And I went back after that summer, and I knew our alumni engagement with our chapter was very low. It was very poor. And so I called up to headquarters. I got a list of our alumni, their information, and I went to the university's alumni department and asked for the Sigma Chi's information for there, so I could start cross-checking the list to see, who had a good address, which ones had two addresses, which ones had no addresses, and really started to work with putting or compiling a list of, where all of our alumni live, their mailing address, their email address. And now to this day, we get a newsletter sent out. And for me, it's very rewarding, because I know a decade ago that all started with my work and getting those email addresses. And because that at that time, that was one of the first times we had ever put out an actual newsletter. And so that's how we want, BLTW to be inspiring, for these guys to go back. And like you said, whether it's, alumni involvement, guys not paying, their dues on time, we want them to go back, have a positive impact on their chapter, and be able to look back and say, wow, hearing of things or knowing of things that have been going on in the chapter that have been positive, and you can look back and say, you know what, that was something that I helped create, and I'm glad to hear and see that they're still doing it, because it means so much now, and it meant so much back then. And again, and then that does start with that kind of top 10 list, is making sure you cover those things that are important to the undergraduate.
Yeah. They say that the definition of learning, I don't know if you know this, but it's actually when behavior changes. So that's what we do want. We don't want these guys just have a good 3 or 4 days. We want them to change stuff, right? I mean, otherwise, what the hell are we doing? And I think one of the things that's really the most surprising about the top 10 list is, honestly, a lot of those things will just naturally and organically be covered in regular conversations. So okay, so we start talking about the finance committee. Well, guess what? Now we've just addressed dealing with guys who won't pay. Now you've got a finance committee go through that. Can we agree we've covered this? Check. So it is nice. But again, what you want to do, or I think what's really important for facilitators to do, is really say, I'm really here for you guys, and again, I want this to be the best McKay experience you ever had. As part of doing that, there's stuff I need to go over, but then I just want to make sure I'm really covering the stuff that's important to you. And then, I think, again, also going back to an experiential exercise, we're going to be asking the guys soon to really kind of chime in and contribute and things like that, but they may or may not be ready. So if they're not ready, go ahead and do this exercise. If it looks like they're doing fine, well, put this in your back pocket and save it for another time. But it's just called the 2-minute drill or conversation circle. And if you heard of this, Mike, you probably have.
I think I have, yeah.
Okay, so you split the group in half, and say you have 12 guys, and if you have 6 guys, you have them be in a circle, and you have them face outwards. Then you have the other 6 guys basically also get in a circle. It's like 2 concentric circles, right? One inside another one. And so they should be facing each other, inside facing out, outward facing in. And what you kind of have to point out is this is a listening exercise. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask a question. I want the inside person to answer first. He's got 30 seconds. And then the outside person will then have 30 seconds. Now, what makes this kind of both hard and awesome is that usually when you ask somebody a question, they're usually thinking of what they're going to say next, right? And you really kind of have to say, don't think of what you're going to say. Instead, actively listen. Okay, so it's good as a listening exercise. But then what you're going to do is you'll ask a question, and inside goes and outside goes, and then you have the outside circle shift one person to the right, and then you ask a different question. But kind of the beauty of this is the questions start off really easy, and then they get progressively harder. Like, what's the last good movie you saw? Shift. What's the best thing about your chapter? Shift. What do you expect to get out of BLTW? Shift. What do you like the least about your chapter? And maybe it's a little bit harder, right? And then this next question, shift. Who's the one person you respect above all else in your life? Don't be surprised if you hear a, and guys are like, oh my God, wow, it's my mom, or it's my dad, or it's this person or this person. And then followed up with, like, hey, if you knew you were going to die next week, how would you want to be remembered? And again, to go through and you kind of facilitate these, the first few are really easy. They require no thought whatsoever. It's just top of mind, bam, here's what it is. We're really kind of starting around the 4th or 5th question. It gets really hard, but imagine if you were a facilitator and that was the first question you'd ask. You wouldn't get very rich answers. It's like, oh, whatever, so just like the icebreakers are kind of a warm up, these questions are also a warm up, and I always like to say, like, man, imagine like a musical artist or a comedian, they've always got like a warm up act before the main act goes on, right? And that's really what these experiential exercises are doing. They're kind of warming people up, and they're getting them ready to open up, and so with that, really, okay, now that we've established this, now that you guys are talking, now let's open up about some stuff. And from here, again, I like to go like, okay, let's talk about what's your current reality look like. What does your current reality look like as a Queastor versus what should it be? And I think, again, it's amazing. You'll say, like, again, you guys have 100% of your time. What do you spend that time on? And then I actually took this from my group last year. They said they spent 90% of their time collecting dues, and none of them had budgets, they spent the rest of the time either paying bills or miscellaneous. And I said, hey, what if I could tell you only 10% of your time should be spent collecting dues? And they were like, what? How? Okay, well, I'm glad you asked. That's, again, this kind of gets into the curriculum. This gets into the finance committee and, some of the software programs and actually having a budget and doing those things. So, but again, if if you're not doing some of those exercises to get people open up, this is a different conversation, I feel, you know. And then we've already talked about this, but I'm very blunt with my expectations, or at least, sorry, with my objectives with the guys. Like, hey, here's what I want you guys to get out of this. Here's what I want to get out of it, you know. And guess what? I'm going to be checking in with you guys constantly to make sure that we're meeting all that stuff, you know. And so say we're at the very end of the first discussion group. I always like to say, like, hey, these are kind of the important things you cannot forget to do as a facilitator. One, kind of give them an overview of the schedule. You know, some of these guys are idiots. Some of, you know, they might have short attention spans or ADD or something, but let them know, like, okay, you guys are going to be in your chapter meetings next, or the big session next, and we'll be back in here in this room at this time on this day. You know, and make it very clear. I also think, you know, they've got group texting or group me set up. And then before I let them leave, though, I always end with, what's the number one best thing you've learned this session? Everybody has to say something different. It pays to go first, go. You know, so in a nutshell, I mean, that's kind of my first discussion group. I mean, maybe if there's more time, I'll maybe throw in a little bit more of the hard Queastor curriculum. But for you, Chris, as a first-time facilitator, is there anything that you do different, or think maybe things you wouldn't do, or what? You tell me.
Well, I don't know. Since you said Chris, I don't know if we have a third person on this recording that I don't know about, because you know, I'm Mike. But you know, I don't think there's really too much else I would add. You know, to that point that you were just talking about, you definitely don't want to throw them the curveball right away. You want to build into that, because you know, you do want to get them thinking and really having well thought out answers, and going into that head on is going to be difficult. Get them warmed up, get them, you know, loose a little bit. You know, you want them to feel comfortable around each other, you know, not afraid to give answers in front of each other. And, you know, so some of these guys are going to be embarrassed with, you know, things that are going on with their chapter, and might be a little nervous to share. But again, if you kind of create that, you know, kind of chapter environment almost, of where, you know, this is your, you know, your safe zone, your safe area. This is why we're here, is to talk about the things that go well and don't go well. And, you know, let's all be behind each other through the good and the bad. And, you know, like I said, building our way up to the difficult questions, that really get us thinking, because we don't, you know, we don't want to scare these guys right away to where, you know, like we said, when you get your evaluation back, it's, you know, all ones, and they, you know, say they've had a terrible time because, you know, they just never felt like there was you know, a good build up, and it was just, you know, straight into the curriculum. And you know, you want them to have a good time.
Yeah, and you know, listen, we've all had years facilitating where I don't know if it's luck of the draw, but we've gotten just a room full of mouth breathers. And I mean, there's just no way of going around it. You know, you're just like, man, I can't get these guys to talk. I can't get them to open up. It sucks. You know, and sometimes that happens too. And, you know, unfortunately, you just got to roll with it. You know, I wish it weren't the case, but it happens, you know, and if it does, then that's okay too, because you've got a great team behind you, you know, alongside you. And that's when, you know, at the nightly debriefs, don't be afraid to say, like, I'm kind of struggling here, and maybe, you know, maybe you could partner up with another facilitator, you know, and that is totally okay. That happens all the time, you know. So, but I think the important thing is, you know, if you can get through this first discussion group unscathed, it'll really set a really great tone for the rest of BLTW. And at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun. It really is, you know. So we're doing all this prep work now because the more prepared we are, the more we can relax and actually kick ass and have a good time at BLTW. So, so that's it for me, Chris, or sorry, Mike, whoever you are. Any last thoughts or parting shots before we're done?
Minus that you just don't know who I am, and that hurts my feelings. But I think you hit the nail on the head with setting the tone. This is the first the first session. You want to set the tone with these guys. And it goes back to the very first things that we were talking about, making sure you're as prepared as possible. Whether it's watching these videos, talking with past facilitators, talking with new facilitators, knowing where to go for answers if you don't know the answer, getting there a little ahead of time, making sure your room is set up. If you've got AV in the room, making sure you know how to work it ahead of time. All those little things. So, like you said, you set the tone, and when you get there, you hit the ground running. And when you're in front of these guys, whether you're nervous or not, if you've got to pull up AV, you can go over there and say, I've got this. And, it's not a dead time of them waiting 5-10 minutes of you trying to figure out how to get something up on the screen. You want to show them that, you're their, kind of like their group leader to a degree, you're their friend to a degree. And, this isn't, we want everybody to have a good time, but it's also not a time to, just goof off and not take things seriously. So getting in there, setting that tone is definitely step one.
Awesome. Well said. Well, I think this first call actually lasted longer than the actual first discussion group will really be. So we'll put things to a close. So, brothers, thank you so much. We hope you guys got a lot out of it, and we'll talk to you later.